Hello, everyone, and welcome to another WCS event. We're just going to take a few more minutes to let everybody in, then we'll get started. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Lisa Ann Pinkerton. I'm the founder and chairwoman of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. I also run a clean tech PR firm called Technica Communications. And we are here today to talk about microfiber plastic pollution coming specifically from the fashion industry. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like to look good. I like to do my shopping. And I also want to be sustainable about it, but that's really hard. And so today we're going to talk about what we can do today to make more sustainable choices in the fashion industry and with our fashion choices. And then also sort of what's coming in the industry and how it can become more sustainable and more eco-friendly for us all collectively as humans on this planet. So thank you for joining us. You could be anywhere today at lunch. You could be out and about, walking around, taking your time, doing your thing, but you're here, you're with us, and we really thank you. Let's go to the next slide. I want to take a moment to thank our event leaders here, Amanda and Melis. They have put in countless hours to organize this event and all the content, all of the social media posts. They have led that effort. So you are here because of the work they did. So I want to take a moment and thank them. Also, let's go to the next slide. These other ladies have also been a part of making sure that you are here today. We have a marketing lead, Nina and Caroline's our event lead, and Gina is our Zoom producer today. She's a volunteer. And so everybody volunteers here and we've all worked together to create this event. So I want to thank you all ladies for your hard work here. If anybody out there is interested in how you might be able to contribute to the WCS community, lend your talents and passion to what we're doing, go ahead and take a picture of that QR code and give us a ring. That slide, please. Quick agenda. We're in the arrival introductions area. We're going to have our discussion. We'll have some questions from you all, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is about an hour event. Next slide. Okay. Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for you're unaware of some of the other work that we do. We have monthly events, and right now they're all virtual, but they'll be in person again soon. Chapters in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And we have a mentorship program that we run every year. We have a big conference coming up to celebrate our 10 years in November. So be on the lookout for that. Next slide. Here's some upcoming events, actually. So we're working on, next week, we'll have a fireside chat about the entertainment industry and how that is becoming more sustainable and some professional opportunities there in the general media industry. And we're also going to talk about ESG impact reporting for corporations. We also have our 10-year anniversary in November. And if you haven't signed up for that one, you're going to want to be there. It's a 3-hour event. We're going to have a big panel with some fantastic women on it. We're going to have a youth panel because the younger generation is really going to have to deal with what's coming. So we're going to talk with them. And then we're going to have an ideathon where we go out into breakout rooms and we talk about what we want WCS to look like in the next 10 years. What are some of the programs you want us to work on? What are some big ideas you have? We've already got our own, but we would love to hear from our community because this is your organization. Also, we have a mentorship panel, demystifying mentorship, actually, at the middle of November. So be on the lookout for those events. Next slide. Zoom etiquette. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this. What we like to share is that mute and unmute yourself appropriately. Share your video because we love to see your lovely faces, and put your full name and add your LinkedIn information into the system here so that people can find you and network. Because when we're virtual, then networking is a little bit more difficult, and the onus is much more on you to reach out to people and connect. And people are really looking to connect with like-minded individuals. We're all kind of bored being separated from each other. And so if you reach out a little bit, you'd be surprised about how many people have a favorable response, and you can have a virtual coffee meeting or what have you. Next slide, please. All right, virtual membership. I'm sure you've all heard about this. Click on that QR code if you're interested in being a member. You haven't joined us already, and you will get reimbursed for today's event. Next slide. Okay, myself, I'm your moderator. I already didn't introduce myself, so I won't spend too much on this, and we will go to the next slide where we introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Beth Rattner, and she is the executive director of the Biomimicry Institute. And I'm going to give you a little background on her before we bring her onto the video. She's been working in sustainability since 2000, and she's been the executive director of the Biomimicry Institute since 2013. And prior to that, she worked with the well-known William McDonough and Michael Beauregard on Upcycle, the sequel to the Cradle to Cradle book, which they're famous for. And she also helped co-found the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute and was its executive director. She's an attorney by training, and she also has been a managing director for one of the first sustainability business consulting firms, Blue Sky, which you may have heard of, and was a business manager for Hewlett-Packard's Emerging Market Solutions Group. So Beth, welcome to the event. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're here to talk about microfibers and microplastics in the fashion industry. And two of the primary sources are tires, which are made of synthetic rubber, and they release the plastic when when there's friction. And then also clothes and textiles. And we've heard a lot of these terms, right? Microplastics, microfibers, microbeads. There was a lot of news around that a few years ago. So to start off, could you help us differentiate from each of these terms?
Sure. Well, so there was a study done by Fibershed and the San Francisco Estuary Institute right here. I live in Marin in the Bay Area. And it was a 3-year study. And they found that 74% of microparticles are actually fibers. And most of those are what we call plastic fibers or polyesters. So when we talk about microplastic, we're often talking about fiber. And I think it's very convenient. Like you don't buy like little micro bead stuff for your face anymore. But the truth is we're doing a lot of laundry. And every load of laundry, you're shedding about between 650,000 and 1.5 million, depending on what you have, of microfibers per load of laundry. So it's getting washed out to the bay.
Wow. This could be very depressing. Some of these like hearing.
We're going to turn the conversation around, Lisa. Don't worry. We're going to start depressing and then we're going to turn it around.
Thank you. Yeah, my brain just kind of went sad for a moment. I apologize.
Don't worry, it's going to be fine.
I want to give a shout out to our executive vice chair, Sarah Fuentes, and we have a volunteer, Oakley Jennings Fast, who run this podcast on Spotify called "What the Hell Do I Do with This?" which is a waste recycling podcast. And they had Kirpa Argwal, who's our volunteer coordinator now. They had her on because she has some experience here, and they were talking about microplastics and in the environment. And they spoke about how even like newborn babies are being born with microplastics in their systems, and that even at the bottom of the bottom of the ocean, there's all these microplastics everywhere. So how are these particles getting into the environment?
Yeah. Yeah, so let's all just like buckle in. It's going to be a little depressing at first, and I do promise we're going to turn the conversation. But I think, and a lot of people know, like, or at least you've heard about this. We're calling it a smog for starters. This is a microfiber or microplastic smog. And for anyone who's seen pictures of Beijing, or you've seen old pictures of Los Angeles before there was the Clean Air Act, smog is a really good analogy for what's happening with microfiber or microplastic solutions. We're at this place right now where you don't notice it coming out of your car, you don't notice it coming out of your laundry, but it just builds up and builds up. And pretty soon, 94% of drinking water has microfibers and microplastics in it. It's right now what's happening is it's getting collected. So it's going through, for most municipal waste systems, you are collecting it. The problem is, so they are collecting it and then they turn into biosolids. And then anybody know where they're putting those biosolids of microfibers? Anybody know? They're putting it onto agricultural land.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So, which is why it's also getting into our food system so readily. In addition to like when it's washed and you have that shedding cycle, the bigger problem is drying, as actually, because the dryer doesn't capture that much. And intentionally, so this is like the insidious part, it's intentionally not capturing a lot because it was clogging up the dryers. So they're like, let's just capture the biggest particles. And there are a lot of great aftermarket products now that are specifically suited for microfiber collection, but most of it's just getting vented right out. And so, of course, then it gets washed into the street and then back into the sewage system, which is part of that 7 trillion. So the wastewater is coming from, it's coming from wastewater. It's also, it's just collecting at the surface waters, and it's in the sediment as well. So and because we live in a system where we really value cleanliness, people wash their clothes a lot. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, that's how it's getting into the system. It's really mostly coming through laundry, unless you happen to live near a textile facility, in which case it's also coming from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you explaining that, because sometimes I think people, they see the plastic waste in the ocean and they might make the assumption that there's certain countries are just not as good at collecting their waste as others might be. And so that's where the microplastics are coming from, right? Big plastic pieces that are then being broken down in smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. And then the natural thought is, oh, well, that's not my problem.
It's not my problem. Right? I didn't contribute to that.
Right. But that's actually not the case.
Well, so here's the other funny thing. It's not funny. It's a terrible word for it. This is the problem. So we've been told this idea, and by a lot of sustainability fashion people, that if we take PET bottles and we turn them into fibers, like it takes about 8 plastic bottles to turn into 1 t-shirt, that's somehow a better solution. And I think the theory is that we think that polyester can be infinitely recycled, and it can't. It breaks down. And when you turn that bottle into a shirt, you naturally it's more braided. You're gonna, like I said, launder it a lot more. So you're actually diffusing the microplastics into the air much faster when you turn PET into fiber. So and we've been told this by sustainability reports, that it's the most environmentally friendly thing you can do is recycle polyester or recycled PET. And it's just not true, because it doesn't take into effect all of the other issues. So maybe you are using less water or less energy in the process, but at what cost? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the truth, and we'll talk about this in a second, but ultimately the answer is natural fibers. Just to cut to in case you have to leave early, the answer is natural fibers. Don't buy polyester. So that is that, and it goes, but I can't even tell you. And I love these people who are working really hard in sustainability, and they will all look at me, Beth, they're like, you're never going to get rid of polyester. Mm-hmm, to which I say, why? I mean, it hasn't been around that long. It's been around 80 years. It's subsidized by oil and gas. And I'm pretty sure no one ever looked at a barrel of oil and said, that's a great looking dress.
I want to wear that.
I want to wear that. Like, so we kept investing in oil and gas. And so the fiber industry just went like, I'll take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you also have the fast fashion industry,
Right.
which is all about the cheapest clothing, like the lowest cost clothing and the fastest churn out, and then it's so how is that contributing to this larger problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the obvious part is, it's in our, it's in our ancient brain, right? It's in this limbic brain that we want color and we want comfort. And so we're tricked kind of by fast fashion. And this isn't to like lay the blame at them. Like at the end of the day, like we purchase it, so it's our fault, but we're tricked. Our brains see this like beautiful thing and then we're seduced by the price. And so you're like, how could I not afford to buy these, this new thing? We're buying 60% more than we bought in 2000. It's 100 billion garments a year for a planet of 7.5 billion people. And not everybody's buying new clothes. So it's very disproportionate. And, if 63% of that is synthetic, then you're having like this huge impact. But I'll tell you, like, here's what sustainability did not count on was, no one saw this coming, was Marie Kondo. I'm telling you, Marie Kondo is like, I don't think she had this same agenda, but this idea of simplicity, this idea that we're going to start buying quality and the things that we really love, and that we're going to clean out our closets. And then COVID happened and people really did clean out their closets. That, don't underestimate the power of Marie Kondo to like change sustainability. That she will counteract and has counteracted fast fashion to a large degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fast fashion industry, I understand, I get it, right? People want to be quote unquote on trend, and being on trend means being a part of a group. Yes. And belonging with yes. Your friends or what have you. Yes. And a lot of times that's also how people show their creativity.
Yeah.
And right. So but there's other ways to do that, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a shirt that you're going to wear 4 times and then the buttons start to fall off because it wasn't made properly. And then, it falls apart after a few washes.
That's it, right? Over 50% of clothing is being discarded, whether that's a landfill or burning within 1 year of purchase. Mm-hmm. Over 50%. So the volumes are high. But I think keep going with your question though, because it's a really great point, which is that we've kind of supplanted community with fashion as an ability to connect. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say like there's a trickery or a seduction element that's happening here, which is to say that of course they play upon that, but we can meet all of our needs with natural fibers. And that is a very unpopular idea. And if you say it, you're like, I heard this woman say, like, I'm going to give you some numbers so that you can have some proof when people challenge you, because they will challenge you. No one likes that answer, but it is absolutely true.
Yeah, so I don't know if I had a question, actually. I was just sort of expounding on why I can see how the fast fashion industry has become very attractive and very popular.
Yeah.
It's seductive even, right? Oh, check this trendy dress and it's only $15. Yeah. Right. I can understand that. So, and it's
changing
also,
though. Isn't it changing though? Like with like Gen Z kids, like they're voting with their values. Their values are being reflected by, and so that part of the community element. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to like. That's fine. I do think it's shifting a little bit.
That's comforting. I'm glad you see that, because I would definitely like to see that as well. It's almost as if and no one's really pushed the fashion industry. I mean, people have, obviously. There's these niche movements to get the fashion industry to really change and evolve itself into a more of a sustainable industry.
Yeah.
Yet I feel like the industry itself hasn't done a whole lot of movement.
It hasn't. And that's why So that's why you keep hearing about recycled polyester, because then it doesn't have to affect the bottom line. They're like, great, I can just keep recycling this thing. And the truth is, it always has to hit the ground. Think of it that way. At the end of the day, the fibers have to hit the ground. And right now they're hitting the ocean just as much as they're hitting and they're landing in our stomachs. Fun fact, adults will have eaten 40 pounds of plastic by the time, you know, we get to the end of our life.
Yeah.
It's an immense number. And so has the way I like to think of it is this promise of recycled polyester is kind of like our addiction to junk food. And if you go to your doctor, you're like, you know, I'm eating about 10 Twinkies a day. Let's hope nobody's doing this, but like, let's say like, and so he's like, well, if you're going to cut back on your sugar and fats, you're going to need to come down to 1 Twinkie a day. Or you could eat as much organic fruit and vegetables as you want, right? And that's, and you know, you hear it from your doctor, your nutritionist, Gwyneth Paltrow on Google, like there's no lack of people telling you that, you know, you shouldn't eat the Twinkies, but you should eat this other thing. Mm-hmm. But somehow the headline becomes doctors recommend 1 Twinkie a day. That's what I feel like is coming out of this conversation. So to jump ahead a little bit. So right now we have the way to rethink this problem is to think about fashion as the solution for climate problems. And that's why it's so great to be talking to you guys, because if we think about it as like, if we turn the issue on its head, it's not about reducing the harm of fashion. It's about changing fashion so that it reduces the harm of climate. So right now, if we would take just our existing farmland, not cut down new trees, but existing farmland, and we do intercropping, we grow hemp, and we grow flax together with where cows and sheep are also roaming, we can actually produce 112 million new pounds of fiber, tons of fiber, which is enough for like 23 billion new garments every year. So and sequester carbon back into the soil and achieve pollination. There's a 6,000 acre farm out of the Rodale Institute where they've done this, and they've calculated it's about 21 million a year in value. So that's increased pollination and decreased eutrophication of the water. So you have, and this is all by just saying that, and you're growing food at the same time. The labor is higher, but that also could mean jobs. So as long as the ultimate metrics work out economically, like that's our answer. And if you don't want, and if you don't even believe that, which even though it's true, let's say that's not enough, just agricultural waste from pineapples and bananas and rice and sugar cane and the hemp fibers too, that's enough for 2.5 times the amount of fiber that we currently consume. Wow. And instead right now, what we're doing is we're lighting it on fire, which is about 5% of greenhouse gas emissions.
Great.
Right. So there's and then if you don't even like that, there's fermentation coming and methanotrophic bacteria taking, like there's so many different avenues that are going to get you to the same cute stretchy jeans that you like and great, you know, tops that can actually breathe well while reducing other problems. So
is this how you see the whole fashion industry basically operating as an ecosystem, which it doesn't right now?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So everybody, like you guys remember back your basic biology class, like what are the elements of an ecosystem? You have to have a primary producer, like that's your berry bush, and you got to have your consumer, that's like your birds, and then the bird poops or the bird dies and it decomposes and it feeds the berry bush again. That's a system, and it's an open system, and it distributes, right? The leaves fall far, and it's fall right now. So we're seeing this kind of process of an ecosystem in action, but no one ever says like we have a micro leaf problem, right? We don't
micro leaf problem.
Right? We don't have that problem, and yet there's a lot of trees in the world, and it's because it's all designed to work together. So what's happening with right now with polyester recycling, which again is like, that's like the big vision for fashion. It's like, can we move from 25% to 45% polyester recycling, and then we'll hit all of our goals? It's like, so all you're doing is like, you're cutting out that decomposition part of the triangle. And the truth is we're not doing a very good job. Back to that 100 billion garments a year, I promise you, maybe 10% is getting recovered. And great, we should do it. But it's not going to matter, because the rest, they're still going to fiber, they're still going to fragment, they're still going to end up in your laundry, and then ultimately we're going to eat it. Mm-hmm. So we have to redesign to work with entropy. This, like, the second law of thermodynamics isn't going away anytime soon. Like, we could pretend that this is not a physical law, and we can do a better job with take back, but it has to hit the ground eventually. And so we should design for that. And we have so many fibers available to us. We don't have to just grow cotton. We should not always grow cotton, especially not in drought, regions of the world. We should have more sheep. We should have more, right? So that they can actually be part of, their ruminants. They can eat the grasses and they can sequester more carbon. We should think of fashion as helping our climate problem. And then we would really redesign it quite differently.
I really love that you said that mental note. That's a great quote. Thank you. Because I think, sometimes when you think about some of the natural fibers that have been available, linen wrinkles, cotton shrinks, yeah. Hemp, incredibly scratchy until you wash it 100 times and run it over with your car, like, which I used to do when I was a hippie in college. Break down those fibers, right? We did that with our leather jackets too. Anyway, all of, I think sometimes people just make these assumptions that, I'm not going to choose 100%, natural fiber because it's not going to give me what I am accustomed to experiencing with fibers that have plastic in them. Yeah. So, and I can understand that thought process. So what's being done to make some of these natural fibers more competitive with plastic fibers?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's an earnest question from everybody. Like my nieces who are, teenagers, like that all they want is soft. It's not soft. Like everything has to be soft. A couple things. You have to remember again that oil and gas have had an 80-year head start. And it's been subsidized. Regen ag is not subsidized. That's not what the Farm Bill is covering, right? So there is an innate cost difference. So they've been able to muck around with a lot of chemistry to get to the kind of fibers that we all like to make us our soft stuff. And it's just now that regen ag and these kind of new fiber creations are getting the attention that they deserve and the investment. So I love Renaissance fibers, by the way. So it's using saline to degum hemp. So unlike cotton, right? Cotton has those little bowls on top. You understand intuitively how to weave that into something else. Hemp is a lot harder because all of the fibers are within the stalk. You actually and it's held together by what feels like a glue. And you have to degum it in order to get it to be appropriate. But nature, and this is where biomimicry comes, nature does this all the time. And one of the ways it does it is through salt water. And so right now, Renaissance fiber is literally using a saline solution to degum hemp. And then there's others like Stex fibers and Ceph, which are new ways of processing hemp so that it feels soft without running it over with your car. It's really much faster. And you don't abrade the tires either. So it's so good. There are a lot of new technologies getting at that, but there's other, and sort of back to the fermentation idea too, there's a new wave of fiber. So we have an abundance of methane. We have an abundance of these polyesters that could become captured gases. And so what we're now finding is new bacteria. So just like we make beer or fermented, kimchi products, fermentation and then mycelium are showing us new kinds of fiber production that are using these other existing feedstocks to make new fibers that we all want. So it's only a question of ingenuity. It's only a question of investment and being able to, again, try to catch up with the subsidized industry. And I have no doubt that we could do it really fast if there was desire. I think as soon as people realize how much plastic they're eating and drinking, and I don't even call it polyester anymore. I call it plastic fiber, because that's what it is.
Yeah, and we've seen the electric vehicle industry really blossom once Tesla came and said, yes, you can have an environmentally conscious car and it's amazing to drive and you don't feel like you're sacrificing anything.
That's right.
For that experience. And I feel like the fashion industry gets a chance to do that same thing. And perhaps as consumers, we can push the industry to do so.
Yeah. It's a great analogy, because Teslas were not cheap when they came on the scene, right? And it was only through the sheer force of, and they used the seduction thing again. Like, they used color and fastness and beautiful design. And this is why fashion is so well poised to answer the call. It can, and I think that designers want to do it. That's the other part of it. Designers don't want to make things that aren't beautiful. And beauty is not just about aesthetics. It's about this sort of deeper, like, is my stuff poisoning people? And so when we get to this, there are another great new fiber is coming out is called Spintex. And they just won if you go to Biomimicry, we'll put biomimicry.org in the chat, because at the bottom of the homepage is a report on this called The Nature of Fashion. And there's a little window if you want to learn more about what we're doing in the pilots. But Spintex is taking a protein gel. And so does anyone here know how spiders work, how spinnerets work?
I think everybody has a general idea, but go ahead and explain for your example.
It's a really cool process, right? How is a spider able to create such a strong silk at ambient temperature, right? There's no heating and beating and treating and going on, and it's through spinnerets, and it basically just keeps pushing and extruding through basically increasingly smaller holes in order to get to this place of it becoming a fiber. It just keeps, and then it comes out. That's what they're doing now. So they can use 1,000 times less energy to make a fiber that feels just like silk.
That's fascinating. That's cool. What other fabrics are out there? And we're going to start taking questions from the audience, by the way. So I've already seen a couple really good ones, and so we'll do that. And Gina's going to help us there. But while people are getting ready to ask their questions, what are some of the other fibers we could look out for?
Yeah, I really want to put in a plug for the natural fibers. I think that, I don't know about you, but wool has come so far. Really great wool shirt. there's companies like Smart Wool and Icebreaker. They're super soft to the skin. They don't feel like the old concept of a wool shirt that you used to think of. They've changed how they spin and how they weave fibers. And you can grow a wide range of, there's wools come in lots of different color. And then there's color grown cotton. For the regions where cotton does make sense, you can grow khaki cotton. You can grow these autumnal shades of kind of auburn and pumpkin shades and yellows, and they smell really good, and they're soft, and the color only enhances as you wash it. So you don't have to worry about
addition,
right?
You're not losing your color when you wash it. It gets better.
Exact opposite. You're actually
crazy. That's crazy good.
It's crazy good. And color grown cotton was introduced in World War II when we were limited as to what we were importing, and they wanted to the army needed more green khakis, and they're like, and some of the cotton bolls were not white. They were more this weird green color. So they just kept selecting for the ones that produced the khaki green color. And so it exists. And when we get to this point of really celebrating, and there's other fibers, there's ancient fiber, like dogbane produces a fiber that really grows under drought tolerant conditions. If you live in the Netherlands, you should absolutely grow flax. And so we'll start having regional economies based upon what your climate is best suited for. And then again, thinking about climate and beauty as your main two goals that you're going after, we're gonna start seeing that. And then And then you'll also have the mycelium. You'll have the bolt threads who are producing really great, mycelium-based leathers, and Kyverdi, which can take this back to that methanotrophic bacteria, and they can create a new protein-based fiber. Wearwool is they're out of Fashion Institute of Technology. They're basically taking the protein from a coral, so like one of those bright red corals from a coral reef, and they're replicating that protein, and it's bright red, and they're using it to essentially grow these fibers that are innately red, and they're innately stretchy. Like, you can have all of these qualities that are grown into the fiber, so you don't have to have any of the toxic outputs. So it's going to happen really quickly, and I think, just like Tesla, the price point will come down as soon as lots of other people do it.
Well, we need it to be quick, because if you know about the IPCC report, we have 10 years to make a dramatic impact on the direction we're going if we're going to stay below, 1.5 C or 2 C by 2050. So the time is now for every industry.
I agree. I don't even like to say 10 years, because 10 years feels too long. I think it's now. I think it's 2 years. And I do feel strongly that if we continue to invest in polyester, we're only slowing ourselves down on the climate front. We don't have the time to get it wrong anymore.
Yeah, you're right. Well, we have some great questions from the audience, so I'd like to turn it over to Gina, and she's going to introduce our first question.
Awesome. So I have a first question from Alyssa, who can't ask live, but she asked the question: how effective are Guppy bags to collect microfibers?
I've heard about them. I haven't used them yet, but
what are they? Just get started for those of us who don't know.
Yeah, to be honest, it's part of the laundry process, and you add it in. There's one called the Coral Bell, I think it's called Coral Ball, and it's similarly, it works on the same idea of just kind of like how there are certain materials that will collect lint. That's what you're doing basically in the laundry process. Anything you can do to invest in these is worthwhile. But again, it's like, that's after the fact, right? So and by the way, the other big thing is, don't really, if you have fleece sweatshirts, don't put them in the dryer. Just dry them on the rack, because again, back to the whole dryer issue. So it's a big issue.
And what about, so my fiance is allergic to wool. So anything with wool in it, he will have a problem with. He can feel it. So that's what he typically, lends. Everything is cotton or fleece, right? Sure. Yeah. For the cold winters. Like, what's another alternative?
Yeah, hemp is great, and there are increasingly more hemp products. Prana makes a good hemp line. Yeah, and I would be interested. Again, I'm not here to promote like any particular brand, but a lot of them are changing how they process the wool. And so I could never wear a wool sweater when I was a kid, but I wear wool all the time now. So that it might be worth revisiting some of these other lines of products. But again, there is no lack of natural fibers. I believe strongly in hemp because it's such a weed, and it can grow under so many different conditions. It can also bioremediate or phytoremediate the soil at the same time. So if you're a fashion company right now, you shouldn't be thinking about yourself as just a fashion company. You should think about yourself as, what am I feeding the world? Because that's what's happening right now. Right? We feel good when we take all of our stuff to good. We're back to the Marie Kondo mentality. Like, we feel pretty good about, like, we march our stuff down there, and then we trust that it's going to get resold or reused. And the truth is 99% of it isn't. And it's just getting baled up, and it's ending up in Asia. It's ending up in Ghana. There's a market in Ghana called Continental Market that gets 15 million of our garments every week. And they can't use most of them. So again, it's got to hit the ground at some point.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And not to mention all of the carbon emissions transporting all of that product across the world.
Yeah, we don't know how to deal with it here. Sorry. Next.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Gina, who's next?
So we had a comment earlier from Lubika. She had mentioned that it's important to publish the real cost of polyester. And a question she often gets from investors is how she's going to compete with the polyester's commodity prices. So I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Part of this is called true cost accounting or total cost, like internalizing the externalities. Part of what makes polyester so cheap is it doesn't have to pay for all of the downstream effects. And it, like I said, it's a subsidized product that they're getting to begin with. They're getting a subsidized feedstock. So if you actually added up the real cost of that polyester shirt, it would be far more expensive than what you're currently paying for it. And when you talk about the health impacts, it's even higher. If you added in carbon, it would be even higher. So again, back to this sort of like regen ag model or the agricultural waste model, at least there you could actually sort of, you could start to point to, well, what is the drawdown effect of my purchases? And I think that as total cost accounting comes to place, but also carbon accounting comes into place, companies are going to be forced to deal with that. There's also a big push, like in California, the California Product Stewardship Council around extended producer responsibility. So once the companies have to pay for their take back, that will also drive back up the cost. And then and this is where the role of policy and regulation has to come in. That's what's going to, we can go back to like our hemp fibers for a second. They can't do it alone. You have to actually force the system to recognize the full cost, and then price parity can be achieved.
Mm-hmm. And is it one of these things where it's these fabrics just aren't as readily available to designers as some of the other plastics, and so they're just going with what's more affordable?
I think that's been at first the default assumption.
Okay.
But there's also, it's really not true. There's a lot of availability once we learn how to deal with these new weaving and techniques and sewing techniques. So it's kind of like back to the junk food analogy for a second. Yeah, it's a lot easier to eat junk food, especially if you live in a food desert, right?
And it tastes so good.
It's so exactly. It's hard to give up, your daily allotment of the Twinkies, but once you do it, you're going to start feeling better. And so, yes, I'm sure it is easier to get your hands on polyester than it is to get your hands on natural fibers. And we're going to have to learn how to make the effort. It's not impossible.
Right. Well, and consumers can be a very strong economic motivator.
Yeah.
You're seeing this with I hate to go back to the EV analogy, but that's what you're seeing in the automotive space, right? Yeah. Tesla proved the model finally, after many failed attempts by all kinds of companies. And then the corporate world and board members and investors started asking GM and Ford, what are we doing about EVs? Tesla's taking over. What's our solution, right? I feel like we need something similar to that in the fashion industry. And you'd think that it would be designers that would really push this forward. But maybe it's more complicated than that.
It's definitely, yes and no. I mean, the other part of it, I think, is I go back to so Teslas are great because they're beautiful and I can plug them in my house. And there's ultimately a convenience factor. I never have to have oil and gas on my hands again, physically. And
it's a status symbol.
It's a status symbol. So I think that as we get to this place where so how many of you have worn polyester workout gear and it stinks and it's really hard to, right? It's really hard to wash. Or you wear a polyester shirt and it turns out to be a really hot and muggy day and you are very physically uncomfortable. I think that these physical impulses away from the stinky clothing and the clothes that don't breathe and you start to wear something that actually feels good. And by the way, wool's amazing because like literally you hang it out in the sun and most of the scent is gone overnight. It's crazy. Once that starts to make its way into the mainstream, the benefits will be very visceral, and you'll have it forever. Like it's not going to wear out at the same rate. And so, and then the Marie Kondo in you will say, I achieved some sense of peace by not buying so much, and my closet looks great.
Right. It's also what I was thinking about Tesla too is what's the social signaling is something that you see a lot, right?
Yeah.
The conservative right has really, played up the whole concept of social signaling.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see that in progressive politics as well. And that's what a Tesla was. That's social signaling to everybody around you that, hey, I've got certain values.
It's totally true.
So we need like a label that everybody can like very visually see when you're wearing some clothes that signals. Anyway, I'm getting off topic.
I think Patagonia was that. I mean, where I live, like everybody has the uniform, like everyone wears their black Patagonia jacket. And I think it's not just that it's the best jacket. I think that for the suited area, I think that it's like, it signals, I put my money where my values are. And I think Eileen Fisher has been a leader in this. Like I said, Prana, Stella McCartney, the price point is getting down there. Like H&M is doing the same thing. Walmart is buying organic cotton. Levi's is saying, don't buy, just buy one pair of jeans and love them forever.
And don't wash them for 50 wears.
They
don't need to be washed.
They don't need to be washed
as often as you think. Yeah. Gina, how are we doing on questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of great questions. One from Susanna, who's comfortable asking live. So I'll turn it over to her.
All right. Welcome, Susanna.
Hi, thank you. So my question was in relation to the question about the winter options and alternatives to wool. And I was curious what you think about alternatives like flower down from Pangaea, and I'll put the link in the chat to their website for anyone who wants to look at it. But they essentially are making down jackets out of flower, and so it's an alternative to the typical like Patagonia jacket we see that's, while better, still made out of unsustainable materials.
I love that you put a plug in for Pangaea. They are fantastic. Small company out of New York. Their founder, Amanda, is a brilliant chemist. And I'm a big believer in flower down. I believe that whenever we can start using plant-based fibers to replace animal fibers, certainly synthetics, we're on our way to healing the earth at the same time. And the performance is as good, if not better. So I'm eager to see Pangaea take off.
That's awesome.
Thanks for praising them. Yeah, they're amazing.
Thank you. I had no idea about them, and I'm already looking at their website, and I think I see something I might want. So anyhow, yeah, if you haven't noticed, I like fashion. I'm not gonna shy away from that. Gina, who's next?
So Sam, her question leads right into this, so I'll let her go and kick that off.
Hi, thanks so much for this event. I do have a quick question. So it just relates, like, I don't necessarily shop at, boutique stores. My question is related to, like, how do you get stores like TJ Maxx, Ross, and Marshalls to procure more clothing made from natural fibers?
I don't know the answer to that because they are mostly buying closeout products from other stores. So the answer tends to be like shifting the whole. So again, back to the 100 billion garments a year and 63% being synthetic, we have to start to shift the whole equation. And then those other stores will start to carry it as well. I can say that this is one of the questions that Lisa Ann, you were asking before about secondhand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I haven't even gotten to that question yet. Thank you. It's
actually, before you go to those other stores, I would buy secondhand because they often declare the fabric makeup on it. You can experience. There's a lot of course, online now. Swap.com. There's, what's it called? ThreadUp. There's a lot
ThreadUp. I use ThreadUp. Yep.
Yeah.
Some of my best outfits have come from there.
Yeah, and you can usually sort on fiber type or type in the fiber type, so you can pull it up. So that's how I would find more affordable natural fibers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. And Okay, I'm not going to get into a tangent. Gina, I can talk about this all
Yeah,
day.
we've had one question that's showed a couple times. So just wondering if there's a list of companies who use all natural fibers, or any recommendations for other stores or websites or anything like that for sustainable clothing.
Sure. Eileen Fisher, not everybody loves that, you know, that style, but Eileen Fisher is a leader 100% in this space. Like I said, Prana is a really great one. There's Stella Mccartney is interesting, and again, not necessarily like in the affordable realm or like popularly one. But they're also they're really committed to this space. And so, but the truth is, so does Gap, so does Banana Republic. Like a lot of them have all natural fibers available. They just don't talk about them that way. Like that's not their bragging right. And so as consumers start to look for that, they'll start to label it. Like I said, Walmart is now buying organic cotton, and it's the same as Target. So it's kind of for now, it's the early days, right? This is still the Wild West. You're going to have to go in and look at labels, and your fingertips are going to get really smart. They're going to start to know the difference in what you're feeling, and you're going to be like, I'm detecting a cotton poly blend in this. But you're gonna get it pretty soon. But I promise you, all of those stores now carry natural fibers. You don't have to have just one particular brand.
Also, while we're talking about secondhand stuff, Common Threads is this great boutique secondhand shop in Boulder, Colorado, but you can buy everything online.
Yeah.
And they're really good about picking things that are, I wouldn't, on trend is kind of a fast fashion term, but like it's like elegant clothing that is gonna like be stylish for years.
Yeah.
So I recommend that one as well. So
I just glanced at the chat for a second. I would love to talk about greenwashing for a second, but also H&M. H&M is making a big pivot, both on their philanthropy side. They have a collab where they're investing in these new companies, and then in the stores proper, and they're also part of the Circular Economy 100. And so back to this for a second, like I love this sort of like the practical questions that we're asking, but I just want to make sure that everybody leaves here today with this understanding that if we're going to have a real circular economy, you have to remember a couple things. That technical loops, like we talk about with circular economy, like they live within biological loops. We live on a planet. I know that sounds like not a big epiphany, but it kind of is. We live and that's an open system. And so we have to start deciding, when you make a purchase, whatever it is, you have to decide, what do I want to feed with this purchase? Am I just feeding is this a junk food purchase, or am I feeding something where I have this bigger sense of value associated with it? That's where we're heading. And that's what's going to give this kind of like, you're going to wear your sweater with a different sense of pride, and you're going to probably talk about it at lunch, and people won't want to invite you to parties anymore because you're going to talk about all these things. But that's where we're headed. And pretty soon, like, again, I'm not trying to bash on the recycled polyester goals. Like IKEA just announced that they're going to move to 100% recycled poly and they also do natural fibers, but for the poly that they have, 100% recyclable. There's a lot of evidence now that recycled plastic and recycled paper carry higher densities of toxins than previously thought. And it makes total sense. Like think about a cup of tea that you reheat, let's say in the microwave, the density just increases over time because you are reheating these fibers. Not so with chemical recycling, but for most normal recycling. And so as soon as that shoe drops, that we're making ourselves sick from these purchases,
yeah,
that'll also push us.
I didn't even want to get into sort of how this is affecting our health, because that's it's another ball of wax that I we could spend a lot of time talking about it. It could be very depressing, but know that plastic in your body changes how your body operates.
It totally does.
And it affects your hormones, and your hormones influence your emotions, and your emotions influence your thoughts. And you may not even know
Exactly
that that's happening. So let's talk about one more thing before we go, because I know we're almost out of time. Laundry. So we've talked a lot about selection of fabrics.
Yep.
What about doing laundry?
Yeah.
How should we wash our clothes beyond just using, biodegradable soaps? Should we air dry our clothes? What's the best recommendation?
Yeah, 100% air drying is, I mean, it's like what our moms and grandmas would do. Like they hang things up on the line. There's a lot of merit to that. And you can't do it with towels because they get crusty and it doesn't work, but you can do it with a lot of things. So do it when you can. But the number one consumer decision that you're going to make probably after today is you're going to start to see what percentage is your fleece. And this kills me. Like when my nieces were born, I bought them those soft, like fake faux furry fleecy things and they loved them.
They're so cute.
They're so cute,
yeah.
And they're just, that should be the first market. So if any entrepreneurs on the call, go after that first with natural fibers, because there's a part of our brain that wants the fur. Mm-hmm. And so let's make it, this is why the Pangea is a great example of like, how are we rethinking flower down? How are we thinking these other fibers that should all be explored?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know plenty of new parents that spend a lot of time and effort making sure their kids are only eating organic food and only exposed to natural, solvents and biodegradable soaps. But then the kids running around in a plastic clothing, basically.
Yeah, you can also start. Yeah, that'll be the last thing I'll say is like, don't call it polyester anymore, call it plastic fiber, because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's plastic fiber.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Beth. This has been a really fascinating conversation and a lot of good stuff to take away and use in our everyday lives, which for me, news you can use is the best outcome of any event. So thank you. We're going to share the screen real quick to do some closing statements. And for those of you on the call, this recording will be made available to you at your leisure. So again, upcoming events. Next week, we're talking about entertainment and sustainability. And then we're talking ESGs. And then we've got our big 10th anniversary summit. Join us for that. You're our community. We love you. We want to hang out with you. And we want to hear your ideas on how to make WCS better for the next 10 years. And we're also talking about mentorship. Okay, next. We do have a community survey that we would really appreciate it if you took, 2 minutes to fill out. Because you are in our community so that we can better serve you. Next. Also, come volunteer with us. Come hang out. We have lots of fun. You will develop leadership skills and you'll be able to put your passion into making the world a better place through WCS. And we have a lot of exciting programs that we're building and we would love to have you involved. Next. And come hang out with us in the virtual world. We're there. And so are you. So let's hang out and collaborate on the interwebs. Thank you all, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. And Beth, thank you very much for being our guest.